Great. Fantastic. It's great to be here today. I want to start off by recognizing that we are on the traditional unceded territory of the Lillooet and Squamish nations. Today I'm joined here by Premier David Eby, Mayor Jack Crompton. We've got a local resident, Nikita Chatwin. We also have City Councillor Jen Ford here with us. And it's a great day to announce some good news for families and people who are living up here in Whistler. And without further ado, I'd like to invite Premier David Eby to the podium to share the good news.
Thanks very much. It's great to be here in Whistler today. It's all I could do not to have Kaylee send our 3-week-old up to test out some planks and see whether we could get her up on the hill today. We have a very serious ski family, and it's never too early to start one of the kids on the hill. So it's great to be here. Although it's not a snow day, we know that snow is eventually coming to Whistler. But as certain as snow comes to Whistler is challenges around housing. There's huge demand here in Whistler for the people who make this place amazing, the people who actually run the city of Whistler, the people who work in the restaurants, the people who work in the tourism industry. They need housing, and it has been a challenge for a long time. It might be fun when you're young to pile into a place with a bunch of roommates, but the charm wears out really quickly. And if you want to build a career and have a good middle-class life in a community like Whistler that's so tourism dependent, where housing can be so expensive, we need better solutions, and Whistler has come up with those solutions. And the province of BC is so proud to support the work that's been happening, the innovative work that's been happening here in Whistler. I've spoken a number of times about the inspirations for our BC Builds program. One of them is Vienna. One of them is Singapore. These are places, expensive places in the world where government takes an active role using public land to build actually affordable housing. But the third that I usually mention is Whistler. The leadership that's been shown by mayor and council in using land that the city owns, publicly owned land, to build actually affordable housing is a model for what we're doing across the rest of the province. And unsurprisingly, we are here today to share an important announcement, which is that the very first groundbreaking of a BC Builds project is taking place right here in Whistler, BC. Ground has been broken on a beautiful new a beautiful new apartment building that's going to house middle-income people right here in Whistler, the people who help make the city go. And it is the first of 4 projects that have been announced for 500 homes. But these 100 homes are just the beginning. There are literally thousands to come using public land to produce housing that's actually affordable for people across the province of British Columbia. This is a demonstration that the concept works, is successful, and can be expanded, and is being expanded right across British Columbia. So I want to thank our friends at the City of Whistler and the Housing Authority for helping us make this first project happen. And I'll pass it back to Minister Kahlon to tell you a little bit more about what we're doing here in Whistler. Thanks very much.
Great. Thank you so much, Premier. And with Whistler's land contribution, the BC Builds team has been working to expedite 104 homes that are available for people living and working in the community. And we expect this to be ready in 2025. Whistler has been growing, as the Premier has highlighted. And obviously, to support the tourism industry, we need to ensure that we have housing available for residents, for those that are coming up here and working and hopefully settling up and putting roots into this amazing community. We know that the lack of housing has been affecting people across the province, and this new BC Builds solution that we've launched has taken a hold. We have seen in other communities where we have launched BC Builds, a whole host of partners from the private sector stepping forward and wanting to help build the housing in our communities. And now we've also seen a lot of local government stepping up with land opportunities. And now we're hearing the federal government maybe stepping forward with land opportunities as well. This is one part of addressing the challenge that we have when it comes to housing. one solution won't solve the housing crisis, but we are addressing this in multiple ways by cutting red tape to allow more housing to be built, by investing directly in affordable housing, by retaining and protecting our existing housing stock through the Rental Protection Fund. These are all measures that we're taking to address the challenge that we're seeing in our communities, and we're starting to see some real positive results. Now, to speak on how this project will benefit the community here, I want to invite up, of course, Mayor Jack Crompton, who will share more about the importance of this project and what it means for the community. So, Mayor, over to you.
Thank you, Mr. Kahlon, and good morning, everyone. It is good to be with you on Squamish and Lil'wat shared territory. We're grateful to you, Minister Kahlon, and to you, Premier Eby, for this tremendous investment in Whistler and in Whistler workers. I want to tell you a little bit today about why this investment is continuing our work making treasure out of trash. Whistler became a municipality in 1975, so we are about to celebrate our 50th birthday, which is exciting for us. Back then, there was a great debate in our community about where the Whistler Village should be. At that time, land use was a provincial matter in Whistler, and a group of local business people believed deeply that the village should be on private land north on Green Lake. The brand new council of the day felt very differently, and they thought that the village should be at the base of Whistler and Blackcomb Mountains, so those two great mountains could be served by one world-class resort. The debate was so heated that the newly established council, Pat Carlton, John Hetherington, Bob Bishop, Gary Watson, and Al Rain, a young Al Rain at the time, decided they needed to take drastic action. It was decided that they would write their resignation letters, they'd put them in their back pockets, and they would visit Victoria. If the Minister of Municipal Affairs chose against them, they would all resign en masse. The bad news was that they arrived after the Green Lake proponents, and so were forced to wait outside for a couple hours while the Green Lake case was made. The good news was that as soon as they entered the minister's office, he told them that the decision was made and that it would be built at the base of Whistler and Blackcomb. So resignation letters stayed in pockets. Council returned to Whistler to get to work. The only problem was that Whistler Village was the site of a dump, a garbage dump. The neighborhood on which we stand today also was a garbage dump at one point. And I want to say that Cheakamus Crossing has become something new, something incredible. Like Whistler Village, it was reimagined first as athlete housing for the 2010 games and now as permanent homes for Whistler workers. Both locations have made treasure where there's once trash. We are fortunate people for brave decisions made by people before us. Today, I think we celebrate another brave decision. I believe it is a decision that not just Whistlerites will talk about for a very long time, but I believe all British Columbians will talk about for a very long time. BC Builds is an incredibly brave move for our province. It's a demonstration of British Columbia's commitment to housing for everyone. The fact that Whistler can say we are very early partners makes me very proud to be partners with this provincial government. The BC Builds program is an enormous step for our province, and it is an investment into a community creating homes for people who make Whistler all it is. A few thank yous, specifically to the members of our RMOW staff team here, Ginny Cullen and your senior team, John Chapman and Louis Tremblay-Renault, who are here, the planning team that put so much work into it, the Whistler Development Corporation, John Morley, and board chair Eric Martin, and the board and staff that work there, WHA Executive Director Marla Zook, board chair Jen Ford, and the whole board and staff that work at the Whistler Housing Authority. The council members who are here today, Kathy Jewett, Jeff Merle, Jesse Morton, Jen Ford, thank you for your work. And finally, and most importantly, to the province of British Columbia, we are deeply grateful for this enormous investment in Whistler and in Whistlerites. Thank you for making housing a priority and for being a great partner to and for our community. I am convinced that this investment is a clear statement of the high regard that you hold for the tourism industry and most importantly for tourism workers. So thank you for the important role that you are playing, turning treasure into trash. We're grateful.
Other way around.
Turning trash into treasure. That was such a good speech. Just ended so poorly. Thanks a million.
Oh man, there's gonna be memes on that one, Mayor. I apologize in advance, but yeah, thank you so much, Mayor. I appreciate the significant partnership. In fact, when this concept of BC Builds first started, Whistler was one of the first communities to come to us and say, we like it, we want to do it, we want to do it in our community because we need the housing for our workforce. We need to have housing available for people to set roots in our community, and we really appreciate that. And of course, the most important people when it comes to this project are the people that are going to be potentially living in it, people that live in our community and what that means for the community. I want to welcome Nikita Chatwin, who will share her story on what this type of housing can benefit both the families here and the community overall. So please welcome Nikita.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I'm very thankful to reside on the shared territories of the Squamish and the Lillooet people. A fundamental aspect of our community's well-being, affordable housing. Build BC and WHA's commitment to constructing affordable housing options for middle-class earners is not merely a pragmatic response to a market gap, it is a testament to our collective commitment to equity and inclusivity. Projects like Mount Fee are fostering environments where families like mine can flourish, where young professionals can live near their workplaces without the burden of long commutes. Families like mine can live and work in the same community, allowing us the privilege to make it to soccer games, gymnastics classes, and participate in community life. Providing density alone is not enough. Housing must be affordable. Construction of market-controlled housing and policies that prioritize low and middle-income earners are the cornerstone of livable communities. It's not just about buildings, it's about building thriving communities. It's about saying loud and clearly that everyone deserves a place to call home regardless of their income level. It's about creating neighborhoods where diversity thrives and where individuals from all walks of life can come together and create vibrant, inclusive communities like ours. Let this kind of initiative and the WHA's efforts serve as a blueprint for other communities in British Columbia. Let us advocate for policies that provide affordable housing as a cornerstone of our community planning. Let us continue to champion initiatives like Build BC's middle-income housing projects. And together we can build a future where housing is not a luxury, but a right, and a future where everyone has the opportunity to thrive in a community like ours. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much, Nikita. And of course, you've pointed to what every community wants. Is to be able to have vibrant, healthy communities where people of different incomes can live together, and it creates opportunities. And you're mentioning wanting to be close to home so you can be gymnastics. I know that feeling, although my little one is no longer little. But those minutes, hours can be the difference for families. And so thank you for that. Now, with that, that concludes this portion of it, and we're going to open it up for questions. And I'm going to pass the mic back to the Premier. Premier.
Thanks for joining us today. We have members of the media online. For those online, please press *1 to enter the queue. All members of the media will be limited to one question and one follow-up. We're going to begin today with Richard Zussman from Global News. Go ahead, Richard.
Thank you all for doing this. Premier, we have heard from some people working in the justice system that there have been some high-profile cases recently delayed due to a lack of sheriffs. I know that your government has hired sheriffs, yet still can't keep up with the demand and the impacts that has on our legal and justice system. What are you doing to ensure that there aren't cases dismissed because of a lack of an ability of your government to get sheriffs in the courthouse?
Yeah, thanks for the question, Richard. For anyone that's facing a court process, or they're suing somebody, or they're being sued, or there may be a victim of crime and the person who committed the crime against them is due in court, to have that delayed is really concerning. And it makes this already stressful process even more stressful. That's why we put a lot of energy into getting more sheriffs online. It's an issue across the province around recruitment of everything from healthcare workers to law enforcement, including sheriffs, workers in various fields where we desperately need the employees to do the jobs to keep our province running. This is part of the challenge we have of a very low unemployment rate, the second lowest unemployment rate in all of Canada. And when we do train up our sheriffs, one of the challenges has been that they're immediately recruited by police departments to go and fill in vital law enforcement roles in other parts of the province. We've had our largest sheriff graduating class recently. We've doubled the number of sheriffs that we're training because this role is critically important for our court system. But it is part and parcel of the larger challenge we have of ensuring that we have people to fill the jobs that are in demand in the province of BC. And it is a vital role. We're going to keep working on it to make sure that it doesn't affect the ability of people to get to court in a timely way.
Richard, do you have a follow-up question?
I do, and two-parter here. One you may not be familiar with, so I'll fill you in on some of the details. We did some stories last week about a lack of support for families with disabled dependents. So in some cases older kids, but largely adults. And after a series of stories that we did on this, the minister provided information that those affected should contact the office and they'll work with them. But then since then, they've been told that that's not going to work and that's not going to happen. So what do you say to these families who are struggling through your government system around providing support for their disabled dependents, but also the respite care that they need, and are now almost more confused about how to navigate the system? And then also on top of that, I understand you signed a letter alongside other premiers to the Prime Minister about the bail reform issue, pointing directly to Tory Dunn and how it seems that this has been a failure in the federal laws. What are you now asking Ottawa to do in terms of further reforms around bail?
Thanks, Richard. I'm certainly concerned to hear that these families are not getting the services they need. I'll follow up with the minister right away to make sure that they are getting that support. While I can't speak about any particular circumstances of a family that's looking for support with a disabled loved one, what I can say is generally one of the areas where we've had difficulty filling in space and providing services in the area of homestays. This is where people with serious disabilities are supported in living with people able to provide care for them in a homestay environment. So if people are interested in providing that care, that's something that we're looking for and we're recruiting for. But generally speaking, and obviously it's so important that families that are grappling with supporting someone who is profoundly disabled, the stress, the time, the energy, they need that respite care, they need that support for their loved one. And we'll do all we can to ensure that it's delivered, and I'll be following up on that. As far as the letter that we initiated at the Council of Federation, this was the meeting of all of the premiers gathering in Halifax. One of the topics I brought to the table was the horrific story of the murder of that has just devastated the Dunn family. The home invasion involving someone who should never have been released from custody. And released in the face of bail reforms that we fought for so hard with Ontario to get across the line at the federal government level. It's an individual who was involved in violent crime, who was rearrested for having a knife and was released back into the community within days of being arrested again, only to murder somebody. This is exactly what we were fighting to prevent. This is exactly why we went to Ottawa with the premiers to demand the changes that were made. So I brought this to Halifax, this case, and around the table, there were examples from other premiers where the laws have failed to address the concerns of people in their provinces as well. The result of that is a letter to the federal government asking in a very straightforward way that they look at the implementation of these new bail laws that they put in place to address gaps that are clearly taking place, and to see if there are ways to work with judiciary to ensure that the laws are being implemented as intended while recognizing the independence of the judiciary to ensure that every judge has access to the training and education that they need to understand the implications of the changes to the criminal law here. Families deserve it, British Columbians deserve it, and all Canadians deserve it, which is why all of the premiers signed this letter requesting this.
Our next question will come from Alec Lazenby on his first day with the Vancouver Sun. Go ahead, Alec.
Hi, Premier. My first question to you is you were meeting with U.S. Ambassador David Cohen at noon, and I was wondering if one of the topics you were going to canvass with him is the Columbia River Treaty. An agreement in principle was recently announced that includes new environmental protections, but also an immediate 37% reduction in Canada's entitlement under the treaty. Does this concern you at all, given it could mean a reduction of revenue and electricity for BC and Canada?
That's not it's not correct. The treaty that we signed with that we hope to sign and update with the United States involves both benefits for the United States and for Canada, including the potential for an intertie between Canada and the United States that will expand our ability to sell power to the United States and increase our revenue. In doing that, it includes some benefits for the United States as well, but that's coupled with our ability on our side to restrict water flows to increase options for recreation and for industry on the Canadian side of the border. So nobody came out of the negotiation an unmitigated winner or loser. We each gave up a little bit. We each got a little bit. But the big goal here was stability going forward. This treaty was at the end of its life, going into a potential period where at the end we would move out of the treaty. We would lose the benefits that we were getting from the treaty. The Americans would lose the benefits that they were getting from the treaty. We couldn't address issues like salmon, water flows, electrical flows, and looking at a change in administration in the United States, wanting to ensure stability in this treaty that has benefited both sides for a long time, while addressing some long-standing irritants in the Kootenays in particular around water levels. So I think we've gotten there. I am very grateful to the ambassador for his work to facilitate those conversations with the Biden administration. And our hope is to get that signed as quickly as possible so that we can get working on that intertie to increase our ability to support Americans with the clean power they're looking for, and for them to support us in periods of low water when we're low on electricity here in British Columbia.
And Alec, do you have a follow-up question?
Yes, I do. Going back to the letter today that you and your fellow premiers sent to the federal government, a lot of the changes in Bill C-48 you yourself called for. Why do you think they're not working to keep, repeat and violent offenders in custody while awaiting trial?
I can't really speculate to why premiers across Canada are seeing that the bill hasn't had the impact that we were all hoping for. What I can say, though, with certainty in British Columbia is in the case of the Dunn family, these changes didn't work. And the goal with the request of the federal government is that they take a systematic look across the country, what's happening, and address any gaps that are there. The criminal code is their law. We count on them to do this work. But there was some urgency around the table of the premiers to draw it to their attention that it's not supporting Canadians in the way that we want it to, in terms of ensuring that repeat offenders are not being released back into the community to commit yet another crime.
Our next question will come from Rob Shaw, Check News. Go ahead, Rob.
Well, hey, Premier. Could you talk a little bit about the impact of what we heard from the U.S. president and his decision not to run for re-election? You're meeting the American ambassador today. You're speaking at the Pacific Northwest Economic Resource Forum. What is the impact on British Columbia, do you think, with the events that are playing out in the United States, especially over the weekend?
Well, this was, thanks, Rob. This was a hot topic around the Premier's table. And certainly it's front of mind for British Columbians and Canadians right now. The United States is such an important partner for Canada. There's very few people that don't have some interpersonal relationship, some sort of business connection with the United States in some way. And to see some of the instability that we've seen recently in terms of politics federally in the United States is very concerning. What came out of the conversation with the premiers and certainly the perspective here in British Columbia is that our job is to really build on those ties that we have with the United States, to recognize how integrated North America is, how closely we have to work together, that regardless of political perspective or party, that we benefit greatly from the close relationship we have from the United States, and they benefit greatly from the close relationship they have with us. And so part of the work that I'll be doing here in Whistler at Penwar, this gathering of all of the states and provinces on the western side of the continent, is to really reinforce those relationships, to find ways for us to work together, to expand the work that we do together, regardless of the shifts we may see at the federal level in terms of policy and priority. It is those relationships from business to business, from subnational government, from province to state, that I think will carry us through any challenge and will help us reinforce the reality of the mutual benefit that we get from working together closely in North America.
And Rob, do you have a follow-up question?
Sure. I guess you've spoken a few times about the worrying rise of American far-right politics influencing BC. So I guess I'm just wondering if you're worried, based on President Biden's not running for re-election, whether we might get hit with even more of that with the politics that are playing out down there. And also, can you update us on the bullet train idea to Seattle? Is that going to come up at Penwar? Is anyone talking about that anymore? Is that realistic? Is it moving? Is it a potential real project, or is it still kind of languishing on the drawing board there?
So on the second question first, Rob, there was a $500,000 grant that went from the Biden administration to keep things moving at the Washington state level, which is obviously a small fraction of the amount of money that's required for a truly significant study, geotechnical study, understanding of potential routes and so on that's needed. It keeps the project alive, but just that. There was some hope that the Biden administration would dedicate a significant amount of money to beginning construction, potentially even, on the cross-border train. This would create a huge potential number of jobs, economic development, all up and down the western U.S. and west coast of Canada. We think there's huge potential in it, but without that kind of funding at the U.S. level, it's hard for us to move forward here in British Columbia in the same direction. So we're still very open to it, still very interested in it, but the project is moving quite slowly. In terms of the influence of U.S. politics in British Columbia, I think that our strength in British Columbia is working together, not dividing people. And it's always been our strength. And the second strength that we have is being open to the world in terms of trade, in terms of recognizing that the diversity of the place we call home. I was out in Surrey at the Fusion Festival last weekend. It was incredible. So many countries represented with their cultures and their food, people working together. It's where we need to be. And I find that is the opposite of some of the political currents that we're seeing, and not just in North America, around the world. So I'm going to be fighting hard to keep people together, to build on our strengths here in British Columbia, so that we support each other and not divide each other. And against some of the pressures that we're seeing around the world, where some suggest we're better off if we isolate certain groups or tell people they're not welcome. I just disagree with it really profoundly, and I'll do my part to hold on to what makes this a special place to live.
Our next question will come from Katie DeRosa from CBC News. Go ahead, Katie.
Premier, I think it was last week you had said, with the prospect of likely a Trump administration coming in, with Biden's resignation, do you change that assessment? And what is your prediction about how the election will shape out and how it will impact BC?
Well, I think a lot of British Columbians are suffering whiplash from what's happening in terms of federal politics in the United States, and to make policy based on the daily updates from the U.S. Would be a bit of a fool's errand. So the overall strategy and approach for British Columbia, and it was consistent across Canada when we sat around the table as premiers, is to build our relationships across the border, to really prioritize emphasizing something that we take for granted, which is that we benefit significantly economically from our relationship with the United States, and they benefit significantly economically from their relationship with us. And it's not just economics, it's cultural, it's tourism, it's interpersonal ties, and that by strengthening those ties, and recognizing how we're better off in North America working together. The hope is that regardless of what happens with the administrations in the United States, that we're able to deepen those relationships and not turn on each other at a really vital time for cooperation.
Katie, do you have a follow-up question?
Yeah, on the housing issue, you've praised Whistler as being sort of ahead of the game, but we know that some municipalities are not necessarily embracing the, top-down housing policies that the government has put in, such as, missing middle and housing targets. What was your assessment of some of the other municipalities and whether they're cooperative on both BC Builds and some of the other of those initiatives?
Katie, I think the vital piece here is what's driving these housing policies, and that's not our government. That is the need for housing that's driven from people that are looking for a place to live. When they're looking at Craigslist, they can't find any place to rent. When they're looking at the housing listings, they can't find anything they can afford, particularly with interest rates right now. And they think the possibility of home ownership is just not realistic for them. That's what's driving our work on this. It's not a desire to control or tell municipalities what to do. It's to ensure that everybody has a decent place to live. And so our goal is to support municipalities in doing that work. We've provided them with the funding to be able to ensure that their bylaws provide townhomes, provide multiplex housing that's many people's entree into being able to access the housing market. It's the first home that they may be able to afford in established neighborhoods where there's good schools and there's a community center, in aging communities where the streets are quiet during Halloween around trick-or-treating. It's a chance to have kids in the community again. And so this is, I would say, if not the most important issue, very close to the most important issue going into the election, which is the political parties that are putting themselves forward in the election willing to stand up and say, we will stand with the people who are looking for housing, and we will make the difficult decisions. We will address the excesses we've seen with Airbnb. We will say to municipalities that refuse to allow townhomes because there's some kind of a threat that only they can imagine, that we're going to say, no, you're going to have to build townhomes. You're going to have to build the housing that families can actually afford. Are you willing to make those hard decisions? And to be blunt, we are the only party, the NDP is the only party that has been willing to say, we will do all the things. We will build on public land. We will rein in speculation. We will tax the empty homes. We will ensure that every single municipality does their part. I don't care if you're West Vancouver or you're the Prince Rupert, everybody's got to do their part. And we'll make sure that it's fair, but there will be no exceptions. And we'll ensure that everybody's building the housing that we need, because we can't afford not to. When you add 180,000 people to British Columbia in a year, it's all hands on deck to build the housing that we need, because otherwise things will only get worse. Rents will only go higher. We will see more homelessness. Housing will be less affordable if it's a bunch of mealy-mouthed politicians refusing to take the action that's needed.
We have time for one more question. I'm going to go to Rob Buffum from CTV News. Go ahead, Rob.
One is the fire in the Barkerville area, the largest living history museum in Western North America. There's an evacuation order in that area. It's getting close to Barkerville. I wanted to know how concerned you are about Barkerville and what's being done to protect it. And the other thing I wanted to get your reaction to is we've heard about yet another closure of an ER in the north and also in the interior. Merritt had their ER closed once again, reopening this morning. Comes at a difficult time, obviously, with wildfires and heat waves. So your reaction to both those things, please.
Thanks. Yeah, it's an incredibly stressful time for a lot of British Columbians. We've got hundreds of people on evacuation order. We've got thousands on notice that they may need to evacuate their homes. And this is unfortunately the beginning of the fire season that we were concerned about. Things are incredibly dry out there. Lightning strikes have started hundreds of fires. Our wildfire services are working night and day to fight these fires with more equipment, with night vision, with better cooperation between municipal and wildland firefighters, thanks to the lessons we learned last season. And that doesn't make it any better for someone that's facing evacuation. And it doesn't address the climate change that's driving these massive forest fires and this unpredictable fire behavior that's threatening amazing historic resources like Barkerville, that's threatening communities like Fort Nelson and others. And I'm very grateful. I'd like to express my appreciation to other provinces that have sent resources to British Columbia, to the Australians who've sent resources to British Columbia, and express my solidarity to people in Newfoundland and Labrador that have also faced extraordinary wildfire risk already this season as well. We're doing all we can. We're bringing in all the resources we can to ensure that British Columbians are supported. On the healthcare file, this is, again, it was an issue that was front and center around the Premier's table in Halifax. All premiers grappling with a shortage of the vital healthcare workers that we need. While the issue is common, I think British Columbia's response to it is singular. We have added more doctors and nurses than any of the other provinces and territories in Canada. Was involved in an announcement recently in Surrey opening a new medical school to ensure that we're training those healthcare workers that we need. And I know that that's not enough when people are facing a closed emergency room. This is a situation that demands government taking action. So I was absolutely astonished to see John Rustad announce that he would cut $4 billion from our healthcare system at a time when our emergency rooms, when our doctors, when our nurses, when the people who work in our hospitals need support, when we need to be recruiting and training more people than ever to respond to a growing population. To cut our healthcare system at this time is astonishing to me that he would stand up and say that. So there will be clear choices on the ballot for British Columbians about responding to this national challenge of a shortage of healthcare workers. Do we want a new medical school? Do we want to ensure that doctors and nurses are properly paid and are coming to British Columbia to work here? Do you want internationally trained doctors and nurses to be able to get to work as soon as possible? Well, that is not consistent with cutting the healthcare system right now. And we'll just see more closures. We'll see a harder time getting family doctors if John Rustad gets his way, and it's just too costly, too risky for British Columbians.
And Rob, do you have a follow-up question?
I do. I just wanted to circle back to the situation over the weekend where Joe Biden made this historic announcement he's not going to run again. You've referenced his administration multiple times and the positive things they've done. Or that you're hopeful of the impact they may have. You've also talked about the rhetoric and alluded to immigration issues that would seem to be Republican issues that they've been campaigning on. I guess I just want to get your reaction specifically to Joe Biden. There's a lot of uncertainty south of the border. What we do know is he will not be president. What's your reaction to that, as well as the prospect of maybe Kamala Harris being the person to run against Donald Trump?
Well, actually, not unlike British Columbia politics, it's sometimes hard to know what the ultimate election will look like in the United States in terms of who's running. But regardless of that, I did want to, and I'm sure President Biden's not lying awake, wondering about what the Premier of British Columbia has to say about his time in office. But I would like to recognize President Biden's work and over a lifetime in politics. I've been in politics for 10 years, in opposition in government. I cannot imagine having been in office for as long as President Biden was, the personal sacrifice, the time away from family, the demands on him and his contributions to the United States, which is quite a remarkable country. I just wanted to thank him for his work and wish all of the Democrats the best of luck in selecting a candidate for the upcoming federal election in the United States. We all hope for a candidate that prioritizes a strong relationship with British Columbia and with Canada, and we look forward to that.
And that's all the time we have for today. Thank you for joining us. We're going to encourage everyone to cross the street for a photo. Thanks, everyone.